Technical difficulties. Well, good evening. Right off the top. Good evening and welcome back to MysticHour Live Podcast about all things mystical and nerdy right here on Proficiency Bonus. I'm your host, Christy Mystic Water. I've already lost it. You know what? Fuck it. We're just gonna go to where we were.
This is one hell of a way to start it off.
Oh, welcome back. We took a 2-week break while we were prepping for the month of April, thanks to my lovely production assistant, Lip.
Hi.
So today, and for the month of April, we're going to be focusing on the theater world and how it correlates to Dungeons and Dragons. And today, we're going to be focusing on D&D versus script writing and lore building, so we're going to be jumping into that. Thanks for the hearts, guys. Oh, Jesus. Oh, yep. I didn't even know it could help if the chat, the chat was below the overlay, so no one could see the chat. That's great.
Oh no.
The
what a morning.
Good morning.
Just hanging out today.
Yeah, we're just hanging out, just me and Lip today. We do have a special little surprise for everybody. We got a little script read that we're going to run through. But before we get into that, per usual, just big thanks and shout outs to Team MZ, Many Sided Dice, OBS Streamlabs, and all the fun supporters of the stream. And if you guys missed it, there was also the launch of Tabletop Legends, which happened on the Tuesday. Gave away some cool, awesome D&D special cover art books, and I think a poster.
Good.
I missed it, but I've heard that it was really great. I'm gonna definitely go back and watch it. So definitely check them out on Tuesdays going forward. Tabletop Legends. Hi guys.
Hello. Bar Too Hard. That name. That's amazing.
I love that name. Bar Too Hard. All right. Well, what do we do, Lip? What's the adventure of the day?
So, we're talking script writing. We're talking, theater. We're talking D&D. We're talking a lot of stuff. We're talking technical difficulties. So, what we're doing today, actually, after just finding out a couple of minutes, I knew for a while, but it just hit me now. Me and Christy come from two worlds of writing. I come from a place of playwriting, and poetry, a little bit of novel writing. Christy is an amazing fanfic writer, which is completely new to me. I don't know much of anything about that.
All the fanfiction, all the OTPs.
So we'll be coming in from those two directions. We will have some branching off that we want to talk about. Obviously, neither one of us are or consider ourselves proficient DMs.
No.
But we will be bringing some pretty fun DMs in later this month to talk specifically about directing and DMing. There's different worlds with that. So be on the lookout.
The whole month of April, we're going to be focusing on the theater world because, as we've found out quite quickly,
so many of you.
There's so many theater kids that play D&D, and I think we kind of understand why. The improv of the role play kind of tugs at that nostalgic heartstrings of like childhood theater and elementary school and high school theater productions. So I feel like a lot of D&D players kind of relate to these types of topics. So we're going to be focusing it on the whole month of April.
Yep. So definitely keep on check out. I'm already giving like the schedule for next week. So come in, join us next week. That's all, folks. But no, we'll jump right in. So writing. There is a ton of different ways to approach writing, as we just talked about, the two of us having different words. Mm-hmm. But when I'll start because I'm very curious for you as well. When talking about fan fiction versus like writing backstory for your character,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think are some similarities?
Similarities. That's hard. It's kind of hard to. I don't know if there's much similarities in terms of writing backstories versus fan fiction. Just because fan fiction, you have the platform of whatever story that you're pulling from. So whether it be an anime or like a Harry Potter book, like you have the lore already established. Whereas when you're building with backstories, you kind of have to build your own lore for yourself. The only thing you really have to go on, I guess, is depending if it's a homebrew or if it's a module. Like if it's something like Waterdeep, you do have those like factions to pull from, but
Yeah,
it's you don't really have like the history unless your DM has given you like some
that
DMs
whole
do. Some
yeah.
DMs definitely do give you like a whole history of the world, and you can kind of pull from there. I guess that would be the correlation between fan fiction and like building character backgrounds. That would probably
And
be
that
my,
way it's probably
yeah.
easier for you as a DM to kind of like have that lore there, because that's one of the things that I think is interesting about um, D&D writing versus like storytelling writing is
Mm-hmm.
that you do create original content, but like you said, there are things that span across a universe that lives within the same realm. These books do have standards of like what an elf does, what a dwarf does, what
Mm-hmm.
these characters do. Who is this famous person like Jark Soul or
Mm-hmm.
any of the characters that are in Waterdeep? They all have different histories that you can tweak, but you have a general idea of what it is.
I guess, like, at least for me, when I was really young, I would create original characters. They're called OCs in the fanfiction terms to insert
Yeah,
into, like, an anime. So, for example's sake, I used to create Beyblade fanfics. I still write Beyblade fanfics. But my very first Beyblade fanfic, I self-inserted myself so I could date Kai Himatari because I was a little girl and I didn't know any better. So I would, but it wasn't really me. I gave her a different last name because, that's what you do.
yeah,
But I gave her a very, like, traumatic backstory, as is pretty common in D&D as well. So I
yep.
guess, like, the OC in my Beyblade fanfic kind of mirrored my very first Dungeons and Dragons character. So I guess there's that correlation when you do the self-insert of OCs, like the Mary Sue of the
Yeah.
fanfiction world versus the Mary Sue or the the Mary Sue of the D&D world. So I guess there's that
Right.
correlation as well. I
That is
wouldn't say it's a
interesting.
healthy way to go about building
No.
characters because, like, I was 12 when I did it, or even younger than that. So
I would definitely
I
say
do still want to date Kai Himatari. I'm not gonna lie. You got me, Bart to Hard. You got me.
we as one of the things you learn in writing school, as it were, putting yourself into your characters is inevitable,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the hard things that happen, which I'm actually learning decently, we talked a bit offline about this as well. You start to get a sense of character dysmorphia when writing,
Yeah.
and so it's important that when you do, it's finding the differences or the small details that can separate you from that character.
Yes.
For anybody that's writing out there, it's very, very important that you do understand that you're going to see yourself in your writing.
Mm-hmm.
Every character is going to sound at least somewhat like you.
Yeah.
Um,
Even
it's
with
just that you,
even with in relation to that, even when you're writing a fan fiction as a character, say you're writing in the point of view of, like, for me it would be for Harry Potter. So I'm writing in the point of view of Draco Malfoy. I'm trying to self-insert myself as Draco. What is Draco thinking? So I'm
exactly.
going to, like, try and disconnect from myself as much as I can, but there's still going to be a little bit of you in that portrayal of the point of view of that character, even though it's not you. So I feel like there's
Right.
that correlation too.
And also, I think that it's something that I usually do as a writer for most of the stuff that I write. I always write from a place that scares me most.
Mm.
I grew up on a lot of places. I don't know if anybody, either in the chat or you, Christy, are familiar with like Rabbit Hole or Angels in America. There's a lot more like popular ones. These plays usually talk about these larger than life things, and as a kid, I had a hard time kind of conceptualizing major things. So like politics was like a big thing when I was like in third grade, and I was just like, I have no idea how to wrap my head around the concept of like what is politics, and I don't even really understand like the word democratic, like, and what does it mean for the country. But Angels in America was this very fascinating thing to me, and somehow politics, sexuality, and religion ends with an angel bursting through the ceiling at the end of this first act. And I was like, I don't know how this all adds up, but I'm going to definitely read it and try and figure it out. And one of the things that the playwright Tony Kushner, man, I almost forgot his name, wrote that he was afraid of dying. The concept is the fear of just what death is, and how that affects each and every person. And so he has every character in the story experience death or a fear of death in a different way. Some people are diving some people are diving right into it, some people are running from it. Right. So it's interesting to think for yourself when you're writing about stuff, and this is something that I struggled with when writing for D&D. One of the first things that with Christy that I learned is Maxian, our character that I played with her, isn't really afraid of much, but is also he's not afraid of much because he's not smart enough to know what to be afraid of.
He's self-roasting Max. He's not really smart to realize he should be scared.
I mean, if you think of all the different things that he's done in life, it's just like, this is a moment to be afraid, but he's like, no. Shadow, students. He says that a lot. Students just find, this is a real thing, in D&D writing, find your quote and just keep running with it.
My car!
Make that your whole thing.
Give your character a line that they always go to. It works all the time.
It works amazing. And it's good for creating staples for your character as well. But for Maxian...
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Maxian,
you're on a roll right now with Maxine. You go ahead. I'll interrupt after.
I was gonna say his fear, the stuff that he is actually afraid of didn't really come until later on when there was a lot more at stake. I think that's the hardest for me. That's the biggest difference between writing in plays versus writing for like D&D campaigns. In D&D campaigns, you can have a beginning point and know that there's going to be a lot more story to happen, whereas for play, you're literally doing slice of life. So when you start...
And plays are sectioned off into like acts, first act, second act.
Exactly. Now, some people, there are DMs that are very, very detailed in the sense that they will break down things into different acts.
End,
right.
Arcs,
and
like character arcs and stuff,
And each session itself should have this sense of feeling like we are going somewhere, we've gotten somewhere, and now we're...
In theory, depending how the party behaves.
Exactly. That's roughly
D&D is everything is in theory. It should act this way, whereas versus like a theater scripted play, like you're gonna get to the second act, so you can take the break.
Now that is an interesting misconception that a lot of people think. With theater, especially with script writing for like one acts for different philosophies of theater, you would think plays have a beginning, middle, and end. They have a direction, and they finish. Usually. Yes. You will occasionally come across those plays. My personal pet peeve play, and I'm sorry for anybody who is a big fan of any sort of absurdist theater. Bertolt Brecht is one of my favorite playwrights, and David Beckett is one of my least favorite playwrights. He writes very cyclical dramas. His idea is that wherever the characters start off at the beginning of the play is exactly where they'll end. And the whole play is about them getting as far away from that character like arc as possible, and then getting back there as quickly as possible. None of the characters communicate clearly to each other. There's always like absurd, ridiculous things happening. Like the perfect example, there's a play called Kitty Kitty Kitty. It is ridiculous. It's about a cat that gets cloned, and the secondary cat is dumber than the first cat, but the two of them have this very existential question of like, which one is the true nature cat? And in this argument that they're having, none of them are making clear points to each other, and then they fall into a cloning device again, and then create a third kitten. And then they realize that all the more kittens, I think it gets up to like 6 or 7 kittens, and the last kitten can't even use language because their intelligence just went through the roof. But it's just this ridiculous idea of like constant repetition, constant clashing, circle stories. Nothing makes any sense, and then by the end, you walk out feeling like nothing was accomplished. I absolutely hate that in writing, but I love that in D&D. I absolutely love that sense in D&D. When you walk out, you're just like, I don't know what just happened, but I had a whole lot of fun doing it. It makes me feel more calm, and that's, I think, for me as a writer versus playing D&D, I want to feel something walking out of theater that's like very, at least I'm driving some sort of hard question, I'm trying to fight for some sort of answer, whereas with D&D I can walk away with the experience with like literal no point whatsoever. Like it just happened. What we hate.
Do you guys have favorite specific plays versus or playwrights? You kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, Bertolt Brecht is one of my favorites. I love, again, another reason why I like D&D as well. I love looking at the bare bones of productions. So Bertolt Brecht writes a lot of, he did the Threepenny Opera. I can list like a ton of stuff that he's made, but his concept is I want to invite the audience. The audience should never go to a theater and shut down, turn off their brain, and just watch. If their brain isn't working when they're looking at theater has failed. So there's constant breaking the fourth wall. There's constant like errors. One of the things that I absolutely love is just like forcing the audience to say like, oh, I'm actually experiencing this. In Threepenny Opera, it's a production about a prostitute who's hard up on times during like a big depression that's happening in her country, and you see the different steps of how far she's willing to go to just kind of make it through. And you, as this voyeur in her life, watch her make some very, very disturbing decisions to try and make sure that she can get through the end of the day. And at the end of the play, she literally looks at the audience and says, "Why do you keep looking at me?" And it's forcing the audience to just be like, "Oh, well, I just paid $20 to come see this ticket. I didn't." And then you're walking out feeling.
I didn't mean any. I'm just here.
And she's like literally asking as you're getting up and walking out, "Help me!" Like, why aren't you giving me money? If you're watching me this whole time, why aren't you actively doing something to make my life not this terrible? You've watched what I just did. Why aren't you helping me? That to me is so powerful. And I think that's what works, especially in D&D, is that like if you sit down at the table and you're just like autopiloting, and then your DM looks at you and just like, all right, so what are you going to do now? And you're just like, wait, what? Who am I?
I mean, to be fair, our DM kind of did that to Asher. Is like, why are you here? Like, what is your what is your plan? Like, what are you like? He gave my character a dream, and the NPC was like, what are you doing? What are you like? Why are you here? And I was like, I don't know.
Heart attack. Insert heart attack right here.
In terms of my favorite plays, I mean, I'm more of a musical nerd, so obviously, like Hamilton, Wicked, like those are my bread and butter. I will go to them to the ends of the earth, into the woods, like that. Those type of things. I love that shit. I was in the play Treasure Island. That was fun. I really enjoyed Treasure Island. Just for nostalgia's sake. Just Treasure Island for nostalgia's sake. But also there's this play that's in Japanese. It's called The Cat in the Red Boots. And it's kind of a comedy / musical. And they kind of do like a parody on Harry Potter. Like there's these magical boots and this cat like falls into these boots and it turns her into like a humanoid cat basically. And it's like it's trying to like figure out what is humanity and what is like your purpose in life, because this farmer guy finds this cat and they kind of go on this magical adventure, and like there's three people that are trying to chase down this cat to get the boots back, and the three people that are chasing this cat to get these magical boots back from her are Hermione, Ron, and Harry Potter, but not really. But it's implied that it's basically like the Harry Potter world is trying to like catch this cat and figure out how to like keep the muggles away from this information. It's like almost like copyright, but not really. They skirt around it in such a way that it's like, you know that it's Harry Potter, but it's not supposed to be. And it's
Interesting.
It's so funny, and it's about like humanity and what you do as a person that's in a lower income status and how you rise above it, and what does humanity mean for this cat that suddenly has an intelligence, and it's like she doesn't want to give up the boots because she'll be gone. And it's really funny, but it's heartwarming, and they break the fourth wall because like Hermione like talks to the audience, and it's fucking weird, but it's brilliant. I love it.
When did this come out? Like where, how? I
help subtitle the DVD into English because it's only in Japanese, so I helped subtitle it into English, and that was almost 8 years ago now.
Really?
Yeah, and we kind of mentioned this guy before, Ikutotoma. If you watched my Johnny's Entertainment episode of Mystic Hour, he was the lead guy that played the farmer's son that had really low self-esteem and really low everything. So yeah, that's what we did, and it was a musical, and we also translated the musical too, and it was insane, but it was so fun. So those type of like gems that you find that aren't really like playwrights in the North American terms, like I just love finding those type of gems that kind of just pop out at you, and you're like, what is this madness? But at the same time, there's layers on it that you don't expect for a comedy. I don't know. I loved it. It's called Cat in the Red Boots.
I'm noting it now.
I'll see if I can find a link for you guys. I'm not sure if I can find it, but I'll see if I can figure out where you guys can watch it. But it's really good.
I mean, if you have any copies of the DVD, I have to figure out how to do that. But I would love to maybe like do like a watch party of it.
Yeah, I might still have it because I like I said, I have the subtitle files for it. I'll have to look into my hard drive, see if I still have it.
We got another question. Thanks, Bart to Heart. You're really throwing out questions. What do you find more satisfying, seeing a really good play or going through a really good D&D session?
That's so hard.
That's a hard question.
Because like
I think immediately
and Wicked, like I can watch those a million times, and each time I get the same satisfaction. The same with like the Heathers. What was it? The Heathers one. Like it's the same satisfaction of like watching those type of like musical plays, and I'm just like, ooh, that feels so good. But at the same time, we've had some really intense...
Are you my mother?
Yeah, we've had some really intense D&D sessions. Like this past one on Storm King's Thunder, spoilers, but Callista has met her father. She's a drow, and it turns out her father was turned into a drider, which is half drow, half spider. And he was turned into a drider as punishment from Lulth, and she's assuming that he's being punished because she's half human, half drow. So her father falling in love with a human probably doesn't favor well with the Lulth, so she thinks it's her fault or her mom's fault that he's now cursed as a drider. And like that reveal, I was so like, I felt my stomach drop, and I was just shook. Like I couldn't even improv. That's how much it shook me to the core. I'm like, how do I even improv as Callista right now? I'm shell shocked. And it's those type of reveals in session when things like that happen. I'm just like, I don't know. I would have to say that I'm more teetered on the side of D&D sessions are more satisfying because you don't expect it. Like plays have a beginning, middle, and end. You know what's going to happen. The ending is there. But with D&D, it's so improv and so out of left field sometimes that you're like, you did not see that coming. And I feel like that's much more satisfying for me anyway. I feel like a good D&D session is much more satisfying than even like the best musical that I love.
It's tough for me because I think one of the things I love about D&D is that it dances between the line of scripted work and improv. It is scripted improv. You have a sense that I write out the histories, the lore, the characters, the response, the ideas. I know what's going to happen, or I have a rough idea of what's going to happen no matter which turn happens, but then I open the world up to other people. And I feel like had I been like way more proficient, if I came into D&D, well, nobody does, but like if I would have came into D&D focused on being a DM versus being like a player, I feel like I would love the feeling of running. I look at Danica's eyes, or like many of the D&D DMs that we have on Probo, and I think of those moments when like a reveal happens. If you guys haven't seen it, but our brew campaign, when the dragons actually met their mother as she walked in after like everything, we were at the top of our game, we just won this entire kingdom, and here comes this woman who like owns us and says, I'm here to just take it all away from you. And what that does to the players, because like it's D&D is such a weird thing. They're not audience members, but they're not players. They're a little bit of both. So you as a DM, you have the opportunity to create this world, showcase the world, and then watch it actively happen with your audience. It's the most like deepest connection I think that any performance can have with their audience.
Because it's like a real-time reaction, even though it's improv, it's like a real-time reaction. And yeah, actually, Bart Too Hard is actually saying, but stay with me here. What about great improv theater?
Yes, I actually was going to talk about that today. By the way, shout out to Bart Too Hard, Russell. Check out Tuesday, like we said. He's hilarious. He's absolutely amazing.
He's a gem.
He was on MysticHour before. We're talking about DC versus Marvel, and I'm going to go ahead and shout this out to you. Don't get mad at me if this is wrong information, but we will probably see Russell for the director's episode and DMs. Yep. So be on the lookout for him. He's cool people. But yes, improv theater.
I haven't done that in a minute. Jeez.
So here in Chicago,
I feel like improv theater is D&D, basically, at least in terms of our streams. Like if you look at Critical Role or the Adventure Zone or like proficiency bonus streams, I feel like that is improv theater because we are showcasing it to an audience. It's not just a closed caption thing like we do on Sundays where we don't stream our Sunday game. That's just for us. I would consider that improv theater because it's just for us. But in terms of these games, I feel like this is improv theater, and I love this.
It ends up being a very super meta situation because not only does a DM have their audience that they're actively playing with, but now you have an audience watching an audience experience something. So now, especially like that brew game or what we saw on Tuesday, you have these moments where like shock happens for the player takes that reaction that they have, morph it into a character, and now us watching the live stream are watching players react to what the director just gave. So it's almost like giving you the opportunity to be in a rehearsal room, that having an audience in the rehearsal room and then watching those discoveries happen. And I'm a writer by trade, but I also am a director by profession, and to me, that's one of the hardest reasons why it's hard to say between theater and D&D moments. For me as a director, I love those moments when the actors in my room actually have that moment for themselves and say, I get it, or like, this connects.
It connects. When you connect with the character so deeply that you almost don't know if it's your reaction or the character's reaction because you're melding with the characters so deeply that you're like, is this me or is this Callista? Is this me? Is this Asher? Is this me or Bubbles? Like, I don't know anymore. And that divide, that blurred line that you kind of cross and you don't know where you stand.
It's so beautiful.
It is a beautiful moment.
It's dangerous. It's very
dangerous, but it's a beautiful moment when it happens.
We were talking about Hamilton in the rehearsal. There was a discussion that Lin-Manuel Miranda was saying.
He's king.
He was writing. He was reworking some of the lyrics and some of the rehearsal lines for
Mm.
Burn,
Oh.
because the two of them had worked with together before, but it was just like something about the language just didn't feel perfect enough. It wasn't feeling like it was the pacing was going well, and so he decided to sit down with her and with the director, with him, and with her. They reworked a lot of lines so that this moment could just smooth itself out.
Smooth
And
transition and just be.
there was a moment when the director asked her if she had ever burned her fingertips before. And she said yes, and he's like, think about the moment when you first singed your finger. And what happened inside of you? And she's like, there's that moment when you burn yourself, you have that sense of doubt of like, this is shocking and I could never expect it. But then there's the other part of you that's just like, I knew this was something I shouldn't touch. When you reach in the oven, you see that cookie, it's not quite done yet, shouldn't touch it. That sense of like guilt versus that shock. And the duality that happens within that is the one that she needed to have in the scene.
Yes.
The fact of guilt of like, I knew who this man was from the very beginning, and then I am still hurt. How am I hurt by something that I knew for such an often time? And in that moment, she sang that song, and it was
perfect.
Out of this world. It was out of this world. Those small moments of when things really connect is like, that's one of the reasons why I became a director. That's one of the reasons why I write the pieces that I write, is to find those moments where people are vulnerable, they're honest, everything gets torn away, and it's just people connecting. It's absolutely amazing.
How long have you been writing or in theater for? Like, when was the first time you started writing?
Yikes. I was afraid of this question. So I started writing poetry when I was 6. My situation as a kid is that I didn't do well with people. I didn't talk really well with people, and there were things that I wanted to say, but I didn't know how to say it right. So me and my mom would have like a conversation, and I was like, that's not what I wanted to say. I wanted to say it like differently. So I would go into my room and I would just write out the conversation over and over again. And then when I had the right like things that I wanted to say, I would tear out that sheet of paper, fold it up, and slide it underneath her door. And so it got to the point where me and my mom had this understanding. It was like, in that moment, she may say like, do you have a problem with this? And I'll be like, no. And then I'll go into my room, and then it will just slowly build and build and be like, I am really upset about this. Here's why. And then I'll fold it up and give it to her. Or when I would come back from like big trips, I would just say like, she'll ask me like, when you went on that like school field trip to go to the Museum of Science and Industry, what did you think? It was like, it was cool. But I would come in our room and I'd be like, well, I really like this, I really like that, I really like that. And it would just span out, because it's so much easier when it comes to me and pencil paper to actually connect.
You've always been that way. Like, that's something that me and the Wednesday group know very deeply about you. You prefer to just write your feelings down and just wall text us just to feel better. Just to feel better. Yeah.
Anytime I have this like extreme emotion, I just write it out. And so I started doing that. By the time I was in 4th grade, I had told myself, I want to write a book. And my mom was like, that's ambitious, but like, I would be proud of you if you wrote like 3 pages. If you wrote 3 pages of a story, that'd be great. By the end of that, by the summer, I started saying I wanted to do that in January. By that summer, I had a 600-page book that I wrote, and I gave it to her, and she's like, cool. I was proud at 3, but this is really good too. And we got that published at one of my local like schools.
Cool.
Ever since then, I kind of like writing. Like you said, same thing. I would just write out my feelings for a lot of stuff, and poetry was a good outlet for just like letting things out poetically. But then theater didn't really start until high school. I went to an art school, and people were just like, you should be an actor. You have these like really dramatic ways of saying things. Like, I'm going to the bathroom turns into a 3-act play. So like, why don't you go to theater? And so I started doing it. I enjoyed it a lot. I had a lot of fun playing different characters, goofing off with people, going to art school if you ever get the chance to do it, but then instantly regret it because you will definitely have that stigma over your head of being an art kid. But I would try and do acting, and I just didn't really like other people's words. I don't want to offend anybody who's there. I think there's a really great job. It's hard work, very, very hard work. I just don't like doing what other people tell me to do. I don't know how to explain it better.
Authority! Fuck authority! That's the best way to explain it! Fuck authority!
That's when I started to realize I was going to become a director. I've had a lot of people just like,
you have to be the yeah.
Can you say it this way? I'm not really sure if like you're really understanding the text. And I was like, I don't think I really want to be in this rehearsal room with you. But then I realized
I was very similar to you growing up. Like my writing started probably in kindergarten is when I first wrote my first short story, and I would illustrate it with like stick figures and stuff. But I realized that I loved writing for myself, like as a hobby, and people didn't understand that was my thing I did for fun. So whenever we had to do like short stories in class, they would always ask me for help, and I'm like, I'll help you, but I'm not writing it for you. I have to write my own. And I wrote my very first, like you, I wrote my first novel, and it was called A Cat's Tale. And I basically just like made cats talk to each other, but the humans couldn't understand each other, but the cats had to like save the human. One of the humans got like trapped in a cavern, kind of like a Lassie type situation, but it was up to the cats, and only the cats could understand each other. And it like I wrote that, and that was probably like 20 chapters long.
Nice.
I don't know how many like pages or words, but it was like basic like one line spacing. That was my first one. I realized I was really good at writing when I went into high school. I think I was like grade 9, and I put in an aptitude test for a children's literature college. And I didn't know that I was applying for the college. I just thought it was just a test to see where my level was. I didn't know it was an application. So I was like, okay, I want to see where my test is on my writing skill. And they sent me an acceptance letter to my house. And they're like, you were formally invited to join the Literature College of Connecticut. Of all places. I'm in fucking BC, Canada. And they're like, yeah, we're in Connecticut. We can do like an online program. And I ended up joining. My parents were so impressed because like I didn't know. I was like, I thought it was just a test. I didn't know it was an application. And my parents were like, well, if you got in, let's put you in. You're grade 9. You're going into a college like credit score, and it will go towards your college. I never went to college, but like it could have gone for credits. And that's when I realized like my writing level at grade 9 was in the college term for a children's literature.
That's so interesting.
And I had no idea.
I would have loved to do that. That's so cool.
But the problem with me is like children's literature is fine and all, but like my bread and butter was still fan fiction. I got more enjoyment out of writing fan fiction than I did out of like original works, because my original works were kind of limited, and I didn't really know if that was the career path I wanted to take. Because again, being a writer, especially children's literature, it's hard to get published. It's hard to get money doing like for that as a career. And I now I regret not focusing on it. But at the time, I was like, it's probably not the best career choice. Like, it's fun. I'm doing it for fun, but I don't know.
So my question for you is, and this will move into the another question I actually had for just general talk topic.
Sure.
Lore building and like lore creating.
Yeah.
What for you is the biggest challenge with original content for building?
Finding an ending.
Really?
Yeah. I have the beginning and the middle, but it's hard for me to finish a story that I'm writing for original work. For me to finish it and find an ending that doesn't feel stale and doesn't feel rushed. And that's my biggest struggle.
Here's the thing that's like super interesting to me. My theory, one of the theories that I've been coming up with as far as writing for D&D is that it's a great way to suss out open-ended concepts or open-ended ideas. If you know your characters really well and you know generally like a topic, like for example, like when I created the one shot that we did on Sundays, I had a one shot where it was all in somebody's headspace and it was going through like a literal mind mansion of just like different fears and histories and pasts. In that, I had no fucking idea how I was going to end that story. But I knew that this concept was really cool to me, and I can create a lot of different pieces. I knew how different pieces would look, and finding a glue for it all works in that particular world because then you can say like, I'll just give it a shot, and I won't have to really come up with the ending. It is up to my audience to come up with the ending.
That's the thing with D&D. Like, at least if I were to write something for a D&D campaign, I feel like I wouldn't have to write the ending because the characters would, like, the players would write it for me.
Right.
Because it's a collaborative effort. Whereas with writing a novel or an original work, like, that's all on you, and the pressure's all on you to find the beginning, middle, and end, and a satisfying ending. And that's, for me, is the hardest, like, because I'm a perfectionist. I look at the ending, I've rewritten so many endings, and I'm like, that still doesn't feel right. Whereas with D&D and DMing and running a campaign, like Matt Mercer, like, he let the players choose the ending.
Yeah. However they want to end it. I like that style. I think that some of the greatest this is I'm gonna firmly say this. I believe that all good storytellers have had some element of D&D in it. If you look at a lot of Shakespeare's work, Shakespeare himself was very into the idea of character, folly, and like resolution, or like great histories that have huge downfalls, and that's like all D&D. It's always a kingdom that falls. Look
at authors like Terry Brooks or Pierce Anthony. Like they pull from the same concepts for sure.
J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings is D&D.
Is like he set the tone for like elves and dwarves and hobbits or halflings. Right. So yeah.
And sure. I think in that sense, there's for me, it makes me feel, and I think this is just about like emotional writing. I feel less daunted in the idea of trying to create original work when I already set up in my head that like we all have this shared collection consciousness. Like writers pull from the same inspirations everywhere, and so in that sense, it's like you are essentially doing that one thing that we talked about at the beginning. You are putting yourself, your story into that piece. So there's some perspective that I have that no one else has. I am from Chicago. I am African American.
We mentioned this before. Stick true to your roots. Pull from your roots and like embrace your roots. For sure.
And that's what makes writing both challenging, scary like I was talking about, and exciting because
and frustrating.
I know it's very, very frustrating.
Block, get the fuck out.
And I think that's for me. Writer's blocks happens for me when I'm being least honest with myself. I want to create a character. I want to create a story that has nothing to do with what I need to be talking about right now.
Point. Yep.
That could mean there's a piece that I just finished writing. That actually I showed to some of the Probo fam. It was just talking about how I feel about my characters and
letting them go.
Yes, and the hardest part of that piece,
which is a part of you, like letting yourself go in a sense. At least when I read it, it was like you were letting a part of yourself go while letting them say goodbye as themselves, but you're also letting yourself go at the same time.
And that's the hardest part of it, is that when I first started writing it, I was like, oh, I'm just going to do something really cute. I'm just going to be like, all of my characters are going to like say hi.
This is fine. No one's going to cry. What are tears?
Exactly. And I got to the end of it, and the first time I wrote it, I was like, this is absolute crap, because I wasn't honest with any of the pieces. All the characters I created, they're Dom from the one shot that we did, I was like, it's just a throwaway character that I just created once and it's fine. But the truth of the matter is that the piece was about, like you said, separating yourself and letting go and saying goodbye to history. And even though there are smaller characters in my world and larger characters in my other, they all play a part of who I am. so in that sense of writing that piece out, I had to almost completely scrap the first piece and just actually ask myself, what is the story that you need to be telling right now? And for me, it was, I need to say goodbye to a chunk of this history. I need to look at those memories, love them for what they are, not overlook them, actually sit down and aggressively look at yourself and say, this is a story you need to tell. You find that there's no stopping once you get started, except for those moments where you're just like, this is too real. I'm gonna go and like have a slice of cheesecake and go to sleep because this is a bit much.
And I've mentioned this in my YouTube video before, where there are moments where sometimes a character is too close to home and it feels too real and it's uncomfortable. And if it's not, and if it's like comes from a place of toxicity in terms of like self-loathing, there's times where you have to let those characters go and distance yourself from that disconnect, because you're like, that's not what you want to embrace. That's not what you want yourself to be. So like with Kai, I was like, I have to let her, I love her to death, but she's not a character that's healthy for me to hold on to. That's a piece of myself that I need to let go personally and in game. I need to let that piece go and just send it out into the void, because that's not me anymore. And
exactly.
There's definitely,
those characters live in a space where it's like that best friend that you've had your entire life. They know every bit of you. They know all of your triggers. They know
what's
going to off.
Yeah.
But even those people that are in your life and those people that you say I can trust, there's a balance game that happens. Because I think one of the things that happen with new writers is that they'll find that character early on. That's the scariest thing. Is I'm just starting to write, but I find that character that can rip me open and show the most vulnerable parts to me honestly. And it is so important that those writers actually write those stories out. Same reason you want to get it out, get it off your chest, because you don't want to keep it in your chest. But at the same time, the balance is, how do I find the opposition of whatever that character is? I wrote this a little bit.
Like the counterbalance.
I wrote this little breakdown that I usually keep for when you're writing different styles of pieces. A lot is good to kind of have some quick notes. For me, I always say like, and I showed this to you, Christy. Bad characters making bad choices is really good for creating cautionary tales. If you know that there's something vile about this character that you're writing about, and the stories that they're telling and the decisions that they're making is just constant mistake or problem or knowing problem after another, you find yourself saying, okay, what can be learned from this character? Obviously, same thing that you said, maybe I have a character that I just started and they're just a vile human being. They're just awful. They kick kittens. They don't like D&D. They're just awful human beings. And the decisions that they make going through their story, or whatever story I'm choosing to talk about with this character, they just can't get it right. It makes it makes correcting that right much more important, because then it's like, all right, if this person's not going to do anything to change their life, what are the outside factors that's going to change this character's life? And that's where the cautionary tale comes. We see that a lot with a lot of Aesop's fables and Shakespeare for sure. If anybody knows this best, he is an awful human being who makes a bunch of terrible decisions, and obviously the universe tells him you're going to
literally
change.
Literally tells him, and he's like,
nope. So that's a great cautionary tale. Good characters making bad decisions, to me, is the best type of comedy that you can write. It's great it's great farce. One of the things that we just talked about on the show, Maxian, I'm nicknaming this episode "Are You My Mother?" Because he finds out that there's like another step in their mission that involves them figuring out what type of magic is talked about in this book. Maxine doesn't know how to read. He means well. He has like the biggest heart for trying to change the world. but he's stupid. So
and especially magic, like he's zero intelligence on magic.
Doesn't know
he's like
anything about
-5. Like nope.
And so he has a lot of people around him that does, and he knows I surround myself with magic users. I don't know how I got into a situation where I really hate magic, but like everybody around me uses magic. Literally everyone around uses magic. And so he went to each person with this book that he had stole because he's a rogue, and asked them like, what
does this
magic
mean? What is this?
Is this magic?
Is this magic, and what magic is this? What is this? And he goes like from one character, like, I don't know, go ask Ukes. Ukes is like, I don't know, go ask Rasham. Rasham's like, I don't know, go ask Scarlet. And he's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, like every single room. Like, what is this magic?
So like it's funny because in your mind you're looking at this character who like is super sweet, super good, and good natured, a fun-loving person, and they just make a bunch of mistakes. To me, that's where I live a lot in my writing because I love broken people, but I love funny broken people. If you all watch the TV show Shameless, it is an amazing show because Fiona, I won't give anything away, but like Fiona is just a hard-working family member. She's the oldest sister taking care of all of her siblings because her parents just can't get it right. And one of her biggest fears is that she never wants to become her parents, but in her trying not to become her parents, she becomes her parents.
Right.
And that's like the age-old tale. I think that's what makes it so universal, is that we all fight to not keep the flaws of our creator.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't want to be like my grandmother. I don't want to be like my aunt.
Yeah.
And then the more you fight to do that, the more you become that inevitably. That to me, it's funny because we as humans are so stubborn that we'll never learn that lesson. But it's fun to watch people not learn that lesson.
Yeah, it's fun to watch them try.
Exactly. So the last two are really harder to kind of create. Bad characters making good decisions are usually how we see histories. I venture to say that Julius Caesar was not a great person, but he made a lot of good decisions.
I would say even Mark Antony would be in that boat too.
Yeah, these figures, Al Capone, I use in Chicago a lot. Everyone knows he has a very questionable moral system, but the stuff that he has created for the city and the things that he's built that lived to infamy is what people love. I don't necessarily want to see a criminal being a criminal, but when I can watch a criminal do things for a reason and know that I'm trying to fight for a better good, it makes for a very interesting noir. We see that in noir.
We also see that in D&D as well, when villains are given an empathetic side. Like there's a reason for the villain's bad plan. Like they have a motivation that you can relate to. So it's like, is that black and white, or is that the shade of gray that you kind of fear is going to be there?
And that's what makes the story so dynamic. We can all create very white characters, which was the last one. Good characters making good decisions.
Default.
It's a TED Talk.
Yeah. Welcome to my TED Talk. Thanks for coming.
The challenge is that you have these black and whites, and I won't shun that because I know there's a lot of writers who just like, well, I want to write about good things. I want to write about
that's fair.
Slice of life. That's when you start getting into more like nonfiction stuff. You want to find the goodness in people where they are good and how you can better your life. Self-help books can do that a lot.
Slice of life genre is fun. It pulls at your heartstrings, but it's there for a reason.
Exactly. But I think what's interesting about D&D, like you said, is that it's meant to be gray areas. And I think that when you run a campaign with folks, either as a player or as a DM, if every good player is making good decisions and every bad player is making bad decisions, you'll never have change. Right. These worlds have to cross at some point. Mm-hmm. So staying on either end is something that we're naturally inclined to do because that's what we are. We are naturally either really evil human beings or really great human beings.
Yeah, there's usually very few and far between middle ground that, at least in terms of people's perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I love about D&D as well. The fact that you have these people who you can have somebody who has this one very particular, I was about to give an example and it's probably a bad idea, but like this very, very specific like political or religious belief sit at the table and their moral stances within a system of decisions is within themselves. And you can have somebody else with a completely opposite sit at that same table and they can exist at this table and still have the same problem to fix. And the thing that makes D&D so structurally interesting as storytelling is that when these two sit at the table, regardless of if this is who I am versus that's who they are, this is a character that I'm playing, that's a character that you're playing, and we are forced within the unities of the story to be a team.
Yeah.
And that's why you see a lot of like movies where it's like the good cop is forced to work with the bad cop, and they have to like figure things out. That
and then
moment
they fall
where
in love.
exactly, when they're forced to be in that one space together, and no matter what your story is, they have to be here, and it has to be natural. I think one thing that I see a lot when I was doing workshops with some of my teen writers is that there'll be two characters that are sitting in like detention, and kids like I don't belong here, and other one's like I'm here all the time, and
Breakfast
they
Club.
really exactly they were like we gotta break out of here. Well, why are we working together? And the person was like, I don't know, because literally this is a piece that one of my students was writing. It's like, I don't know, because the writer feels like this needs to happen now. And I'm like, that's very beautiful, going back to the Brechtian, and just like looking at the writer and being like, hey, you forced this to happen. I don't actually want to be here.
Touche, motherfucker, touche.
Exactly. I see that in D&D. Shout out to folks who play my Shadowrun team. We had a new player come in and he had a decision. It was like, I want to stay in my apartment. And everybody's like, well, no, there's like a bunch of problems that we as a team need to go figure out. And he's like, as a character, I feel like there's something in me that's telling me I should follow you all and go with you all. I think it's because I will probably not be in the game next week if I decide to stay at my apartment. These moments are like, again, very interesting of like finding a creative way of saying like we're together and we're chained together. Let's make this a Saw movie. We're all chained together in a room and we have to figure this out. Yeah. Basic information. Or like less creative.
And it's kind of interesting, like you were saying that like good characters that make bad choices doesn't necessarily make them a bad character, like a bad person. And I see that a lot in Callista because she now wants to kill two gods. And that fundamentally should be bad, right? Like she wants to kill the Raven Queen. Not a very good thing. Wants to kill Lolth. That's a little bit more on the gray scale because Lolth's a fucking bitch, but you know. But being a god killer in the D&D universe is fundamentally bad.
Fundamentally bad.
But she as a character is fundamentally good because she does it for the sake of keeping the people she loves safe and by her. So for her, like playing that character where I know she's fundamentally good at heart and she has good intentions, the way she goes about her intentions aren't gonna be great going forward in the future.
As the Ado tale says, the path to hell is paved with good intentions.
True. Okay.
I woke up to be a good.
We do have a script to read, and I want before we get into that, I kind of wanted to touch on this before. Is you wrote this? Lip wrote this script as me and him, like our characters on the Sunday game. He wrote it in my point of view, like as me. So he put himself in my shoes to write my character. I do this all the time in fan fiction. This is a thing that, as a fan fiction writer, you are forced to do all the time. You are forced to sit in that character's shoes and have a conversation with another character. And that's a good exercise as a writer to just, instead of like writing out the details, just write the conversation word for word. Who says this? What comes next? Who says that? What comes next? And that's kind of what you've done here with this script. Yeah, and I love this idea. So I want to kind of jump into it because the idea that you wrote this as my character and what you think my character would say is very interesting. So I want to kind of jump into that.
Okay. I'll read the stage direction just so you guys can get a little bit of lore. I won't explain much because it tries to explain a lot of what happened within the story. Mm-hmm. But cool. Piece is called The Trouble with Gods. Well, a local town pub houses a quaintly sized purple-skinned elf beside a wooden tan limber half-elf. Both attempt to cover their bloody clothes as the rest of their fellow travelers lay rest at a table nearby. The half-elf, Maxian, looks onward to his comrade, Ashra. I... You... There's something on your cloak.
It's blood. You smell like piss. Did you really have to fight him? And what was the point of pissing on yourself like that?
It is the duty of the students of Shadow to address honestly. He and I fight together and show a mutual understanding for the shortcomings we may have. I respect anyone who lets out their anger and puts everything on the table. The urine, it was just my way of standing my ground.
You were on the floor. You would have died if you weren't careful. This pride you have, it's not cute or adorable. You know, it's typical. It's ridiculous. It'll get you killed one day.
It would be worth it. I'm willing to give my life for what matters, especially for those who are...
Or what?
Who are like you.
Like me? What, an elf? Of course you think that. Maxian, not every elf is some band of brother waiting to be liberated. Trust me, I would know.
I do. Trust you. I mean... Please know that. I'm just... I don't want you to... I don't know. Give me the words to speak.
What? What is it?
It just eats at me that what we've done. That girl, she's actually dead now. She was in chains, Ashra. Done was...
What we've done is to protect ourselves. And you need to get a grip and lower your voice here. There was no innocent girl, Maxian. I don't know what the fuck she was, but she attacked us. She laid hands on Okuma. She would have killed us all.
But would she have? Honestly. Would such a creature, demon, or whatever, attack, if not Rasham remains so sure of it. So ready to dust off the whole matter as another medal on his goddamn arm. Such pathetic pride on you consider... such pathetic pride when you consider there may be an innocent girl that I... Who are the real monsters? Really. Just look at us.
What do you mean, look at us? Look at you! This damn Look. We are not that girl. We are not like her. You are something different, Maxian. You are very, very different. And I would kill her 1,000,000 times if she laid a hand on you or anyone else from my family. What we did was what we had to do, Maxian. You must believe that.
Make me a promise, please.
What?
Don't forget me. Whenever this is all over, please forgive me what I've... Yet never forget me. You are... It would mean a lot to me if you would never let...
How could I ever forget you? Why would you ever think that? You have nothing to be forgiven for. You get so tied up about how I think about you. Why? Why do you care so much about what I think?
You know, it's times like this that I miss my mother most. She would know most what to say and things... She would know what to say most when things right away that other people could understand. She would have been in shock to know the likes of could ever exist.
I bet she would. She would have quite a few opinions of me, I'm sure. Look, enough about this, okay? We should get back to the others. I'm sure there's someone in need of saving from Rasham's stories.
Asha,
What now?
nothing. Just thank you. You're what I've always dreamed of. Only you know.
Okay, Shadow Boy. Okay, let's go.
Scene!
Scene!
That went way better than what I thought it was going to be.
Considering I haven't even read through it once, so yay, go me!
Cool, yeah. I like, one of the things I like about that, especially what you're saying. Me and Chrissy have been running a campaign for such a long time that you can know that person. But at the same time, there's when I write, there's this thing called public and private worlds. Everyone, when they wake up in the morning, has a self that they show the rest of the world versus their internal self they keep to themselves. They lock up and they don't want anybody to see. Usually chained to a wall.
Yes. And I would say that you would show yourself to different people differently, for sure.
Exactly. This was a moment where two people have private selves that they're showing to each other, but there's this public facade of them. So there's this idea that Asher is somebody that is publicly seen as somebody who is, I don't know the right word to use for it, but like is definitely not your average sight, and somebody who is more prone to being ridiculed by or judged by the public,
as Drow tend to be.
Exactly. And then you have this half elf who is very like open and honest with himself, except for he's open and honest with everyone else, but he refuses to be honest with himself. And I think that's the hardest thing of writing about characters, when you know that much about a character, and you know that's been one of the reasons why I don't do a lot of nonfiction. You know all the different facets of people. So writing something as simple as, I am telling you this situation hurt me, the other character is saying, get over it, end of scene. That is ultimately what happened in that moment. But if you read through every little bit, and one of the things I usually do is I usually write out all those honest stuff. So like Maxian saying, literally, you are Jesus. He actually had that line there. Writing out all the stuff that your character will honestly say publicly, and he just eliminate it. What does that conversation look like when you say, I love you, and you know that's what your character wants to say, but they don't say it because we're not perfect people. We don't always say what we mean. So they erase that out. How can this character fight to get to that moment again and then realize, I missed it. There was 3 moments where he was like, I really want to say this,
but he doesn't. Like, Ash is just not putting up with it. Ash is like, can you stop? Like, yeah, I'm sure your mom would have opinions about me. I'm sure. I'm fucking purple. I'm sure she would have opinions about me.
Exactly.
Thanks for the reminder, bitch. Like,
and that's
like when I
read
through your script, I was like, there's things that I personally would add, but I wanted to see how you interpreted my character, and I just love that you put yourself in her shoes, and it just
like happy. Be there. It's fun to do. If you're ever having trouble writing your characters, like Chris said,
it's a good exercise to just like
jumping into other people is great.
Yeah,
that's what D&D is so fun. You're literally jumping into other people,
imagining how a scene is gonna go. Like in your head, you're like, okay, I'm gonna say this, this, and this, and they're gonna reply with this, this, and this. But when you're in the improv scene with D&D, it never goes that way, and very rarely can you ever get the full amount of things that you wanted to say in that conversation because they're not reacting in the way that you imagine them they would. And yep. That's just,
we've all had those
D&D.
moments where you're just like, I'm gonna go up to this person, I'm gonna say all these different
life, yeah.
And you just get completely choked up. Or that one person says that one. My favorite scene to write is someone knowing, for example, if I knew that Christy was saying absolutely hell no, we're never going to have a Spider-Man musical for Mystic Hour next week. That's not happening. And I know that that's how she's going to respond to it. So I sit down and I literally say, all right, I'm going to bring up this point, I'm going to bring up this point, and I'm going to bring up this point. I'm going to have this whole setup list. And then when I sit down and talk to Christy, I was like, so here's my idea. And I say it, and she's like, that's a great idea. And I was like, well, then what about this? Wait, you said yes at once. So I have all these things. My favorite is, how long can this person go down this list before they realize yes was the one? That is the best. That I love writing those scenes over and over again.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good, as a writer, just like even whether it's fan fiction, script writing, or even building a character idea for D&D, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and like writing the conversation in full is a really good exercise.
And for the folks who are D&D players, I don't know if there's a lot of folks who get into D&D with hopes of becoming a writer. That's one of the things that's inspiring to me. Here in Chicago, I'm trying to be a part of a library, bookstore company that wants to teach teenagers and adolescent youth how to get more excited about writing. Sometimes getting into D&D does help with your excitement for it. If you are that person and you're watching this stream, one, hello. Two, if you are playing D&D already, take the time to be your own lore master. This is something I always tell every single person. Me and Chrissy have both had moments where we played that within the party. You usually have your bard or your person that sits down and just like narrates a story to you. My character was a rogue. Maxine was not somebody had a lot of entertainment background or a lot of like scholar background, but I made a note that no matter what, he would carry around a journal and just write out the stories. And one of the things that everybody saw after a while, it was really great when we started getting folks like Ani and Bree to jump in later on. They had this entire long thing that I just wrote, and it's simple short stuff. There's sometimes where it's just like one line, like, yep, this guy is an asshole. But having that and then seeing the story at the end, when you look back and you're just like, this is a wonderful plot, this is a wonderful story, this is a wonderful 3-arc structure that I can write out, you can start looking back at your piece and you're like, I want to write this out. I want to write out that moment. I want to have this character have that perspective and go into that other person's character and say, this is how they will respond. Maybe I do want to tell that story about how that little girl was killed, what was happening in her world we got to this moment. There's a lot of different ideas that happen when you just become your own master, or even as a DM.
That's a really good point, because like Astra is a druid, so she doesn't do any writing or anything. She's very in tune with just the nature and just living in the moment. Whereas my bard Azura, she has a sketchbook. And my DM gave me like the sketchbook in Roll20, and I've just been writing since the very beginning, like notes on every character in the campaign, including my party members. And like you said, like, this guy's an asshole, and I wrote that about Dale's character. I'm like, this guy's an asshole. I'm like, oh, sometimes he's okay. Oh, he owes me money. Oh, he owes me this. And like, I will just like write like little snippets, like, oh, I drew the Colossus in the ice cave, and I'll forget that I wrote that, and then I'm like, actually, she drew the entire scene. So I have like this huge sketchbook of like notes of every single thing that we've encountered that she drew or wrote out in a journal. And it's kind of nice to just go back and be like, oh yeah, I wrote that. She drew that. Exactly. And before you know it, stuff like that can become a whole book within itself. I'm gonna see if I can pull up that sketchbook, because there's some pretty funny lines in there.
If as far as like playwriting as well, some of the most interesting plays are ones that don't have a very traditional sense and are just that. There's a play, I forget their name, and I'll try and see if I can list it later on for folks who like watch the YouTube. I'll put it in a like link below or so. But there's a play about a married couple that had their entire relationship written out on Post-it notes, because when they first went on that date, they had like a note saying, go and get a new suit for this date. Then they had like, when they started moving in together, it's like a note on the refrigerator saying, go pick up milk. And it was just the entire course of their relationship that were just a series of Post-it notes. They took all of those Post-it notes and then made the entire play based off of it. So it's not them talking. There's now two people sitting down talking. It's just a male and female actor sitting at a table just reading Post-its as they post it around the theater. So that at the end, the entire stage is filled with their conversation that they had through each other's notes. Like my favorite is just like, like that moment where they just stopped talking to each other, and it was like, dinner's in the oven. I hope you're happy with what you did. And it's just like a post-it. And then like you can, as a director, you can create pieces where it's like, I'm taking that and I'm gonna have that slap it right on their forehead because that's how I feel about them in that moment. It's really, really cool how you can take non-traditional stuff and tell stories off of that.
Okay, I found it. So like some of the notes, I'm just gonna like brief over some of them. But I'm like, so the very first note I wrote about him, this is Azura to Veneer. He's like this Eladrin elf that came to the party randomly. I wrote, he's looking for a cello player, but he's lying about his reasons. He conveniently invited himself on our journey, saved me from asking him. I'd rather keep him close and keep an eye on him than let him go. I must figure out his intentions. The next one, he's funny. Scratch that. He can be a heartless dick. And then 2 sentences later, actually, not that bad, I guess. He owes me 45 gold. He seems to be engaged to the new Fae Queen, and then it just keeps going, and then it's like, we ended up mind melding. Our 2 characters ended up mind melding with the mushrooms in the Underdark. And she sees a scene where Veneer gets his nails done by his sister, and she's like, Veneer got his nails done. He was a lovesick puppy. I'm dying.
Oh my god.
So
That's
like
another one.
Notes. Oh god.
For anybody who is also joining in who doesn't already know the amazingness that is Dale, he too will be on this month.
I think so, yeah.
I think he's doing a DM one again.
I think so.
I don't know. I'm literally putting everybody in DM. Just for the record as well, Russell wanted to make sure that we knew he will probably be on next week when we talk about improv.
Yes.
Because he is the improv king.
Yes.
Well, he's a teacher for improv, so.
And it kind of like goes like in lieu of this one because we're talking about script writing versus like improv and like how we like act in D&D versus acting it with script writing. So it kind of like transitions into the improv of D&D and theater next week.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of folks on next week that I'm excited to see because players, if you all saw the MysticHour takeover episode, that was just one long improv scene.
Yep. Basically, everyone was being Christy 1, Christy 2, Christy Prime. I don't even know. I got so confused. I wasn't Christy anymore, so that was great.
And we just yes into everything.
That's the key to D&D and theater. Yes and.
Yes. I think we're gonna probably see Dale, Victoria, Jamie. We're gonna see a bunch of folks. I'm just like randomly listening off people. If you're not on that episode, sorry, but hi, thinking about you. But we'll see a lot of folks that'll come on, and one of the things I'm excited about them, especially from my perspective as a writer, is that there's so many different ideas and creativity that comes out of improv and the people who play improv. If you all saw the opening episode of Tabletop Legends Tuesday, there were some strong characters. There was a lot of personality and very interesting kind of like relationships that happen between these folks. I won't give anything away. Watch the episode; it's really, really good. But like watching how these folks interact just naturally as these characters. I don't have a script in front of me. I just know who I am. I am like my mini writer for my own character, and I'm just putting them in this bigger world. It is so fascinating to me when things happen. Like you said, there's moments where it just clicks. Me and Christy never intended for our characters to be as intertwined and connected as they were, but just because the nature of us starting in the campaign together and like how the story kind of played itself out, it just made sense to interlap.
And that's the
and then
thing
when
too,
it happens,
is like
it's just beautiful.
It was beautiful. Our characters connected and clicked instantly, but at the same time, so did we as players and as friends. Like it kind of like melded over and kind of like overflowed into like real life as well.
Yeah, it was nice. A beautiful moment. It's one of the things that makes me excited to be both a writer and director. Is that to see that happen in the room when I'm writing. I love to see those moments where it's like these actors. One of the plays that I directed was called Marcus or the Secret Suite, and I'll talk more details about that in that episode when we talk about it. But it was the moment that we stopped acting. It was rehearsal had stopped, and we would leave, and the play was so good. We all know those like theater kids who do that. You're walking out and you're saying the line.
And you just
Musical, you're
feel
saying the
so
lines on the
good.
play.
Like you've nailed
You
that
feel
one.
so
Like
connected.
you nailed that performance. Like you definitely have days where there's performances of the theater of the play that it just bombs and it just like you're not getting the
Yes.
same reaction as you did the last night. But the night when you
Yes.
get the reaction, when you get the laughs, when you get the emotion from the audience, you just feel so good when you leave that theater. You're like, yes, we nailed it.
Exactly. And then the repetition that happens a lot, that you know that you're going to be performing like 3 times a week or like 5 times a week, some people 7 times a week.
Mhm.
And you get into the point where you just know these lines where me and Christy are in love with Hamilton. There was an episode that I literally broke of insect check because
I helped break that inside check because I was always putting in the one-liners like, wait for it. In the
just
room
the
where
line
it
that
happened.
you have that moment where you connect with that group, and that's your like circle, and it becomes those like one-liner moments. Or My Mother end up becoming one of our Sunday campaign, where it's like I can kind of just reference a line and we all instantly know.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful moment when you can actually have that experience in both theater and D&D. It happens quite often.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Any last thoughts as we start to wrap things up? I just want to give a quick shout out to my theater coach from elementary school. I actually went to Betty Huff Elementary here in British Columbia, and they have an excellent theater program, and that's mostly in part to Steve Swadling. And he was never like my elementary school teacher, but he was always my coach. And if it wasn't for him, I don't think I would ever be in the improv or theater scene or any sort of writing. Like, he encouraged us at a very young age. Like, since kindergarten to grade 7, he was always there helping us with performances. And, like, our productions over at Betty Huff are, like, some of the biggest. They're always sold out, always, like, 200 plus tickets for the gymnasium. And they always sell out. And it's because of his dedication to the cause and the creative arts for children. And he is an amazing person. If you ever want to check him out, his name's Steve Swadling. He's amazing.
Get him in your personal room. Have him teach you all the theaters. I want to say that you saying that made me think of Sheldon Patinkin. Rest his soul. If anybody has watched The Princess Bride, you know his brother Mandy Patinkin. Sheldon was the chair of the department when I went to Columbia for the whole time that I was there, and then sadly, I think a year and a half after I left, he passed away. He is a national treasure, gem of theater. I had the honor to have him come see one of the shows that I directed, and one of the things that he said about my directing, about my living life, about my just being a decent human being, he literally said, stop fucking around and just do it. Just do it. I know that when I was doing the play, I just couldn't really like figure out. I don't know. It was like something I was doing with directing. I couldn't really figure it out. Really sure if this is what I wanted to do or if that was what I wanted to do. And he came in, which was scary. I was like, oh my god, there's a super famous person walking in to see me do my directing 2 project, and it's terrible. He came to me. He was like, you have a really good vision for things. You just need to do it. Like, stop pussying around. Just fucking do it. When he walked out, my jaw was on the floor. The famous person just looked at me and just said, stop pussying around. Just do it. So I definitely try and give that advice to everybody as well. Anybody who's looking to try and get into writing, get into directing, just getting into theater in general, or getting into D&D.
There's so many amazing mentors out there in the theater world and theater programs, not just for adults, but also for younger children, starting like at age 5, basically up until high school. Like, there's so many great mentors. Listen to them and embrace what they tell you because they know what they're doing.
Yes, and you have it. None of the stuff that we can say isn't stuff that you already have. You know your story. You know what to say. Just do it. Just go out and do it. D&D, find your local place. Find an online place. There's hundreds of resources for folks to get into little campaigns.
Roll20,
yes,
online campaigns.
All of them are out
check
there.
Out Critical Role. Check out the Adventure Zone. Like, start somewhere.
Start here. Proficiency bonus. We're all theater nerds. So yeah, definitely hit us up if you're ever interested. Any pluggers?
Check out my Patreon, which I haven't really been doing much on, but patreon.com/MysticHour if you want to support the stream and the show. Definitely go check that out. There's definitely rewards for getting you into our private Discord and getting you on the show potentially, or adding topics and stuff. So there's that. If you like what we do, definitely go check it out and support us. I think Proficiency Bonus also has a Patreon itself as well, so check them out as well. Twitter. Hang on, let me put that in the chat real quick.
Yeah, put both of our Twitters on there. Is there as well.
I don't know how to spell Twitter. Teacher!
When writing, please at least use autocorrect. Don't use autocorrect.
Never use autocorrect. That's a dangerous game.
I have the worst experience with autocorrect. But yeah, check out our schedule throughout the week.
Yep.
To all my folks, Wednesday, hi, I miss you. And I miss everybody at Probo. I'll see you around for sure. And yeah, keep riding, everybody.
Yeah, we love you. Thanks, Lip, for doing this. He's the brains behind this month and next month, so he's gonna be here helping me out going forward on Mystic Hour. He's now pretty much co-host now.
Oh no!
Oh yes.
I'm just here.
You're here forever and ever and ever. You're mine forever.
Well, I'll definitely see you guys next week for sure. And we here for the month, so
yeah, come back for Dungeons and Drama.
Dungeons and Drama.
All right, guys. We are gonna cut it a little bit early just because I gotta go out for food. And yeah, we will see you guys next week. Remember to check out Storm King's Thunder tomorrow night, and we will see you next week. Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.